My parents want me to hand my house to my brother. The words echoed in my head, as if repeating them out loud might somehow make them disappear. But they didn't. The reality was far worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. I, Lena, had bought my house with years of hard work, countless late nights, and sacrifices that my parents had quietly observed, occasionally praising, but never fully supporting. And now, in a meeting that felt more like a courtroom than a family discussion, they were demanding I sign it over to my younger brother, Jason, the so-called golden child, who had always been the favorite. Jason lounged in the living room, a smug smile plastered on his face. He didn't even pretend to be modest about it. He had charm, confidence, and the ability to twist people around his finger, qualities my parents had rewarded since he was a kid. Everything he did was celebrated, everything I did was scrutinized. Growing up, I had learned early on that fairness was never part of the equation. Mom cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly but firm. Lena, this is for the family. Jason needs the house, and we think it's best you. I cut her off. Best for who? For Jason. Or for you, Mom? My heart raced, frustration and disbelief fighting for dominance. I worked for this. Every brick, every bill, every decision was mine. How can you even ask me to just give it away? Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He avoided my gaze, muttering something about family unity and keeping the peace. But I knew better. They weren't keeping the peace. They were consolidating control, rewarding Jason and testing me. Jason leaned back, crossing his arms, still smiling that irritating, self-satisfied grin. Come on, Lena. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know Mom and Dad are right. I opened my mouth to argue further, but then I remembered my lawyer, Mr. Patel, waiting in the car downstairs. A calm, clever man who had been handling my property affairs for years. Someone who had seen the way my parents had tried to manipulate me over money and assets before. I excused myself, heart pounding, and called him in. His eyes scanned the papers my parents had prepared. Then he laughed, softly at first, then more confidently. Not mockingly, but in that way that made the room's tension crack like ice. What's so funny? Mom asked, suspicious, her hands trembling on the dining table. This, he said, pointing to the documents, isn't just wrong, it's legally absurd. If Lena signs this, it won't hold up in court for a second. In fact, his grin widened. I might even enjoy seeing how your plans unravel. I felt a chill, a spark of hope, and an unease that tingled in the pit of my stomach. My parents looked startled, and Jason's grin faltered ever so slightly. Something had shifted. The dynamic had changed. And in that moment, I realized, this battle wasn't just about a house. It was about control, respect, and finally standing up for myself. Little did they know, my lawyer's laughter wasn't just amusement. It was the opening move in a game they weren't ready to play. The days following that confrontation were tense, almost unbearable. I tried to act normal, but the cracks in my family's facade were impossible to ignore. The first red flag came in small, almost imperceptible ways. Mom started whispering to Jason on the phone when she thought I wasn't around, her voice unusually cautious, almost secretive. Sometimes they would laugh softly, a sound that made my stomach twist. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone alone told me something was being planned behind my back. Then there were the subtle shifts in attention. Jason, who had always basked in their approval, suddenly got more than usual, extra money, hints of inheritance, and promises of future business opportunities. Every mention of family assets, or legacy plans, seemed to favor him, and every time I spoke up, it was dismissed. Don't worry about it, Lena, my mom said one evening, brushing off my questions about the house. But the hesitation in her eyes betrayed the truth. They were trying to manipulate me without being fully honest. Even small interactions stung. At a family gathering, Jason got the best seat, the largest portion of food, and praise for a minor accomplishment. I was told to wait for my turn, a phrase I hadn't heard since I was a child. Watching him be rewarded while I was sidelined, I felt the unfairness like a weight pressing against my chest. Money matters raised even deeper suspicion. My father, who had always been cautious with finances, suddenly approved transfers for Jason's accounts without question. Documents I had requested as part of my personal business planning were delayed or redirected. Even my lawyer noticed. "They're trying to control the narrative," he said quietly during one call. The emotional toll was crushing. I found myself pacing at night, stomach knotted, replaying conversations and analyzing every glance, every word, every interaction. Could my parents really be this blind to fairness? Or were they deliberately choosing sides? And Jason, was he truly innocent? Or was he the architect of my marginalization? One evening, I caught my mother hiding a folder in her study when she thought I wasn't looking. My pulse spiked, my heart thumping with suspicion. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I held back. Patience, my grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. Observation first. Strategy second. Even as I struggled with anger, hurt, and disbelief, I knew one thing: something was off. Very off. And the closer I looked, the more the signs of favoritism and manipulation piled up, painting a picture of betrayal I couldn't yet fully grasp. For the first time, I realized that the battle for my house, and everything it represented, was just beginning. The question was, how deep did this betrayal go? And how far would I have to go to reclaim what was mine? It all came crashing down one evening when my lawyer, Mr. Patel, called me into his office. His expression was calm, almost serene, but the weight of what he was about to show me made my stomach drop. "Lena, I've reviewed the documents your parents tried to get you to sign," he began. "It's worse than we thought." I held my breath, heart hammering. He spread out the papers on his desk, the transfer agreement for my house, red flags highlighted in bold, and emails between my parents and Jason. My hands trembled as I scanned them. Every clause, every line, every signature had been manipulated. They hadn't just asked me to hand over my house. They had constructed a legal trap to make it appear as if the transfer was voluntary. And if I had signed, I would have lost everything, legally. Then came the kicker. Hidden in the margins of some contracts were clauses giving Jason control over not just my house, but adjoining properties, and even partial access to the accounts I had painstakingly built. My inheritance, my investments, my autonomy, all lined up to be stripped under the guise of family agreement. I felt a wave of disbelief and rage collide in my chest. How could they betray me like this? My own parents, the people who had raised me, were conspiring to take what I had earned. And Jason, my brother, the golden child, was smiling while plotting my downfall, knowing I trusted him. I sank into the chair, heart pounding. They were going to take everything. I whispered, voice shaking. Mr. Patel nodded gravely. And they didn't think you'd see it coming. But your grandmother, she anticipated this kind of greed. That's why she advised patience and careful observation. She left protections in place. We can fight this. Anger surged through me, sharp and hot. I wanted to storm into my parents' home, shout, scream, demand justice, but I knew that acting recklessly would play right into Jason's hands. This was a calculated betrayal, and it required a calculated response. Tears pricked my eyes, not just for the house, but for the betrayal itself. The parents I loved, who had always taught me integrity, had prioritized their favoritism and my brother's comfort over fairness. My home, a symbol of years of work and independence, was suddenly a battlefield. Yet beneath the heartbreak, a spark ignited. My grandmother had prepared me for this. There was a way to reclaim what was mine, legally, decisively, and without giving them even a hint that I knew the extent of their manipulation. I clenched my fists, feeling a mixture of fury and focus. The betrayal was complete, but so was my resolve. Jason and my parents thought they held all the cards. They were wrong. And I was ready to turn the game in my favor. The question now was, how far would I go to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and make them pay for thinking they could take it without consequence? Prompt 4 Turning Point, Inner Strength. Continue the story from Part 3. Write Part 4 of 7, 400 to 500 words. Show the hero shifting from hurt to determined. Add a powerful realization, or trigger moment where the hero decides to fight back. Make the transformation emotional and natural. High voltage sign must stay true to the betrayal in the title. I spent that night pacing my apartment, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a storm. The documents Mr. Patel had shown me replayed in my mind over and over, every manipulated clause, every hidden signature, every deceitful email. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. My parents, my own family, had tried to rob me of everything I had built. And yet, amidst the hurt, a spark ignited. Grandma's words echoed in my memory, patience and observation are your greatest weapons. Don't rush, Lena. It wasn't just advice, it was a call to action. For years, I had allowed others' judgments and favoritism to dictate my sense of worth. Jason had thrived in their approval, while I had fought quietly to prove myself. But now, the realization hit me, my value, my power, and my rights weren't determined by anyone else, not by my parents, not by Jason, and certainly not by their schemes. They had underestimated me, and that was my advantage. I sank into my chair and took a deep breath. The hurt was still there, but it began to transform into determination. I wasn't powerless. I had knowledge, legal protections, and a clear path outlined by both Mr. Patel, and indirectly, my grandmother. Their arrogance had blinded them, they believed I could be bullied, manipulated, or frightened into compliance. They were wrong. The trigger moment came when I reviewed one clause in the documents. A tiny, overlooked legal safeguard, a contingency Grandma had inserted in case someone attempted to seize my property. The clause could nullify any transfer that wasn't fully consensual and supported by independent verification. Victor, Jason, I corrected myself silently, had assumed victory, but he had walked straight into a trap. A surge of clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about asserting my autonomy, reclaiming respect, and proving that I would not be undermined. I wasn't the hurt child in their favoring game. I was the heir to a legacy of strength, cunning, and foresight. I stood up, fists clenched, and whispered to myself, they think they control the story. But they have no idea what's coming. By morning, the transformation was complete. The fear and heartbreak had not vanished, but they had sharpened into focus. I had a plan, the legal leverage, and the confidence to see it through. Jason and my parents believed they had cornered me, but they had overlooked one crucial element. I had patience, strategy, and resolve on my side. The battle wasn't over, it was just beginning. But I knew, with unwavering certainty, that this time, I would be the one standing victorious. And in that moment, I realized, revenge wouldn't just be about reclaiming the house. It would be about reclaiming my power. I didn't rush. That was the first rule. If Jason and my parents believed anything about me, it was that I'd react emotionally, cry, shout, threaten. So instead, I smiled, stayed quiet, and let them think their plan was working. Step 1 was gathering proof. With Mr. Patel's guidance, I requested certified copies of every document my parents had tried to use against me, the transfer agreement, the emails, the messages, even the phone records. What they didn't know was that Grandma had insisted all her legal matters be handled through a monitored trust account. Every call Victor, my mom's new husband, had made to the notary, every rushed instruction, every attempt to bypass me, it was all logged. Late nights became routine. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop glowing, piecing together a timeline. The dates didn't lie. The signatures didn't match. And the biggest mistake of all. They tried to execute the transfer before the trust's mandatory cooling-off period had ended. Step 2 was letting them feel safe. I played my role perfectly. I told my parents I was considering their request. I told Jason I didn't want to tear the family apart. I even pretended to look for apartments, casually mentioning how stressful moving would be. Jason soaked it up. He started talking about renovations, about his future in my house. That's when I knew he felt untouchable. Step 3 was setting the trap. Mr. Patel advised me to do something that felt counterintuitive: invite them all to one final discussion. Not at my house, but at his office. Neutral ground. Legal ground. I sent the message myself, careful and polite. Let's settle this properly, as a family. They agreed instantly. Why wouldn't they? In their minds, I was already defeated. Behind the scenes, Mr. Patel prepared the final blow. He contacted the trust administrators, flagged the fraudulent activity, and scheduled an internal review. He also arranged for a court reporter to be present, just in case, he said with a knowing smile. Step 4 was timing. Everything hinged on that meeting. The trust review would conclude that same morning. If Jason admitted, just once, that the house was already his, it would legally confirm intent to seize assets unlawfully. All I had to do was let him talk. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Not from fear, but from anticipation. They still believed they were in control. They believed I was cornered, desperate, compliant. They had no idea that every word they were about to say would seal their fate. As I closed my laptop and looked around my home, the home they thought they'd taken from me, I whispered, "Tomorrow, you lose." And the most dangerous part. They were walking straight into it, smiling. The day of the meeting arrived, crisp and tense. Jason strolled into Mr. Patel's office, confidence radiating, convinced he had already won. My parents followed, expressions carefully neutral, though I could see the slight tremor in my mother's hands. They thought they were about to finalize a victory. I entered last, calm, collected, carrying nothing but the truth, and the stack of evidence that would shatter their illusions. The room fell silent as Mr. Patel began. "Let's review the documents concerning the property transfer," he said, his voice steady. "We'll go line by line to ensure everything is legally binding." Jason's smug grin faltered the moment the first contract appeared on the table. Emails, messages, and notarized logs were presented in chronological order. Every move he had made to seize the house illegally was documented. Every instance of parental collusion was highlighted. Then came the moment of exposure, the trust clauses my grandmother had set in place. Mr. Patel explained calmly how any transfer attempted without my full consent, or prior to the trust's cooling-off period, was null and void. Jason leaned back, attempting to feign ignorance, but the legal documents didn't lie. Next, the audio recordings. Soft chuckles turned into wide-eyed horror as Jason's own words revealed his manipulation. "Don't worry, Mom's on board. Lena won't see it coming," he had said in a voicemail. My parents' faces turned pale, guilt and panic flashed across them. The final blow came when Mr. Patel asked Jason to sign a final statement acknowledging the legitimacy of the property transfer. Jason hesitated, and in his nervous stumble, he revealed intent. I thought she wouldn't challenge it. That admission was all the evidence required. Legally, it confirmed he had knowingly tried to take my house. Mr. Patel nodded to the trust administrator, who declared the attempted transfer null. Control of the property reverted fully to me, without dispute. Jason sat frozen, his confidence shattered. My parents slumped in their chairs, realizing the magnitude of their error. The humiliation was total. The golden child had been exposed as greedy and reckless, and the parents, who had tried to manipulate the outcome, were left powerless. I felt a rush of triumph, not in cruelty, but in justice. The house, my years of hard work, and my independence were intact. More than that, the betrayal that had threatened my life and my home had been dismantled, piece by piece, in front of everyone. I turned to the stunned trio, voice calm but resolute. This isn't just about the house. It's about respect, fairness, and honesty. Something you clearly forgot. As I walked out, leaving Jason and my parents in the wreckage of their own making, I realized the game had changed. The house and my life were mine again. And for the first time, I smiled, knowing victory had been not just claimed, but deserved. The dust had settled, and for the first time in months, the house felt like mine, not just the walls and floors, but the life I had built within them. Jason's arrogance lay in ruins, his reputation shattered among family, friends, and even business contacts, who had once admired his confidence. My parents were quieter now, their favoritism replaced with a humbling awareness of what their blind trust in him had cost them. Walking through my home, I felt a strange calm. Every corner, every room, bore witness to my struggle, my determination, and now my triumph. It wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was proof of my resilience. Staff and neighbors treated me with newfound respect, no longer questioning my authority or doubting my independence. The empire of my small world was secure. Even my parents, humbled and silent, began to treat me differently, not with fear, but with a cautious respect. They had seen firsthand what happens when betrayal is met with preparation and resolve. The lesson had been harsh, but it was unforgettable. Jason, meanwhile, retreated from the spotlight. His charm, once so potent, was powerless against documented evidence and strategic planning. Calls went unanswered, and his attempts at public explanations crumbled under scrutiny. The man who thought he could take my house had lost not only the property, but the facade he had relied on. I sat in my office one evening, reflecting on the journey. The heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the tension, it had all led to this moment. I had transformed from a hurt, sidelined child into a strategist, a fighter, and a rightful owner standing tall. The betrayal had been painful, but it had forged me into someone stronger, sharper, and fearless. To anyone watching this story, have you ever faced betrayal so deep it shook your foundation? Have you ever felt the walls closing in while someone tried to take what was rightfully yours? Share your experiences in the comments. I want to hear how you overcame it. And if you want to see more stories where preparation, courage, and justice prevail, make sure to subscribe. Because here's the truth. Those who attempt to steal from you often underestimate patience, strategy, and resolve. They believe power lies in intimidation, but power lies in preparation and principle. Looking out over my property, the city lights reflecting on the windows of my reclaimed home, I whispered a quiet truth. Those who try to take what isn't theirs often become the first casualties of their own greed. And with that, I finally felt free, vindicated, respected, and stronger than ever. The game was over. The house was mine. And justice had been served.